It's a pleasure to be here and to speak to this group. Uh, I had the pleasure of visiting Korea last fall and meeting with various engineers and managers at CASA and at a couple of universities in Seoul. And it was just a pleasure to see how much progress and real advancement is happening in Korea, and to see the cooperation between Korea and the American aerospace community is just marvelous. Um, as a precursor, I loaded onto the chat a link to a podcast that was dropped, in fact, just yesterday or the day before on YouTube. This was a long interview with a podcaster who does a regular show on innovation and uh, uh, entrepreneurship. And he asked me to speak with him about my experiences at NASA and about the technology readiness levels and technology readiness assessments. Now, that's not my subject today, but I thought that these might also be of some interest. It's a little long. I apologize. All of his questions were very well prepared, and so I took too long speaking to him. But um, please, please, if you're interested, you might make a copy of the link and take a look at it at some future time. Okay, so today, modern and modular space solar power. So this is the vision of space solar power, which we heard about a moment ago, harvesting sunlight in space and delivering it to remotely by wireless energy transmission to markets on Earth and to locations in space. Um, this idea arose from the technology developments of the 1930s in terms of microwave, high efficiency microwave RF power generation, radar, as well as the developments of the 1950s of rocketry, photovoltaic cells, spacecraft, that led in the 1960s. In fact, 1968, all just in 2 more years, it'll be 60 years ago that the idea of the solar power satellite was first articulated as a practical, technically feasible idea. It was studied at some length in the 1970s and the early 1980s. At that time, however, using the technologies of the mid 1970s, the system concepts were enormous, and as a consequence, were projected to be enormously expensive. The image here in this slide is of a single satellite in which the solar array is 5 kilometers by 20 kilometers in size. So the solar array is larger than Seoul. And the two dots on the ends, the bright dots are microwave wireless power transmitters using clastrons and large precision rigid aluminum waveguides. Each of those is 1,000 meters across and is mechanically pointed. And this implied a really stupendous terrestrial and in-space infrastructure, again, using the technologies of 1975, 1976, and would have, excuse me, would have entailed, if that had been pursued, an investment of something like $1 trillion to realize the very first kilowatt hour. Now, because of the extreme costs and the distance between the state of the art in 1980 and the and this vision, all work in the United States was stopped in the 1980s. Work continued In other countries, this is now an update on the current status. Flash forward through several decades, there was research and development in Japan. There was research in Europe, research in Canada. In the 1990s, so when I first got involved, some 31 years ago, doing studies on the new concepts for space solar power, using technologies that had emerged during the 20 years between 1975 and 1995. And essentially, electronics, modern solid state electronics, have completely transformed how space solar power might be accomplished. There have also been recently two fundamental changes in the space sector that have changed the economic viability of space solar power. First and foremost is the emergence of very low cost launch. This is just the last 10 years. Before the Falcon 9 reusable, it was a truism that reusable launch was never going to happen in our lifetimes. It was so expensive. It was so hard. NASA couldn't do it. Then obviously nobody can do it. And then boom, SpaceX and Blue Origin. And now SpaceX, Blue Origin, Rocket Lab, Honda Motors, Long March. There are lots and lots of organizations all working on very low cost launch. And within the next 5 years or so, there will be multiple competitors focusing on the new large version of the New Glenn launcher, the 9-4 configuration, and the Starship and Heavy booster being developed by SpaceX. And as a consequence, altogether between 10 years ago, when launch was $20,000 to $40,000 per kilogram, 5 years from now, it will most probably be $200 per kilogram, a 99% reduction in the last decade. At the same time, the mass production of space systems has been demonstrated because of mega constellations such as Starlink, the Kuiper system, OneWeb, and multiple other projects. So the idea of designing modular systems of systems where the pieces can be mass produced instead of having to make them like the Hubble Space Telescope or like the space station, where there are huge systems that are made in laboratories by, in operating theater like environments. Instead, mass production, just like consumer electronics, jet engines, automotive technology, which is now extremely advanced, and on and on. And the cost of manufacturing aerospace systems has gone from hundreds of thousands of dollars per kilogram to hundreds of dollars per kilogram. The current version of Starlink is like $900 a kilogram. Again, a 99% reduction in the cost of manufacturing space hardware. So lots of advances in technology, advances in cost reductions in the two major drivers, cost of launch and the cost of production. There are several key questions for space solar power. For example, what are the systems concepts? What is the status of the relevant technologies? We've just talked about some of that. What are the key performance parameters? What are the expected economics? Could space solar power actually be developed on a meaningful scale within the next 10 or 20 years? And which countries and companies are working on space solar power? I'm going to touch on a number of these through the lens of an independent study which I have led for the International Academy of Astronautics, the International Astronautical Federation, and the National Space Society. The starting point for this study was to identify all of the different ways in which space solar power might be accomplished. These are the 8 types listed on this screen for the platforms in space. These are the half a dozen different ways of doing receivers for space solar power. And from this set of options, the study project spent an extended length of time doing a down selection, an evaluation, and a down selection from some 36 concepts down to 5, plus one baseline reference system. And I'll take a moment and tell you about these. There were critical questions, characteristics that went into all of this, things like what is the approach to power delivery? What part of the electromagnetic spectrum is used? Is the system going to be stick-built or thin-film deployable kinematic structures, robotic assembly? What kind of solar power generation? Is it multiple platforms? Is it one platform? And so on. And ultimately, it was decided that there needed to be some standard assumptions in order to develop systems models of the competing approaches. So for purposes of comparison, all of the concepts were assumed to deliver 1,000 megawatts at the grid on Earth. It was assumed that there would be 24 gigawatt hours electric every 24 hours. There could be gaps, but it had to be 24 gigawatt hours every 24 hours. Energy storage of moderate energy storage was allowed. The total system had to be all weather, i.e., it's of no value if space solar cannot do better than ground solar in terms of intermittency. All of the systems had to use a common launch architecture, and all of them had to use one or two different choices for in-space transportation. These were the 5+1 concepts that were identified. In the upper left is an updated technology version that was inspired by the 1979 reference system. The next 5, starting in the middle left and going forward, are a concept that came out of the Chinese Academy of Space Technology, inspired by, not the same concept, a concept that was inspired by a sandwich module approach with gravity gradient stabilization that originally came from the JAXA in Japan and the Unmanned Experiments Free Flyer Institute, USEF, in Tokyo. Then there were 3 concepts that used reflectors, the T6M1, T6M2, and T6M3. Most of these are in GEO. The T6M1 concept uses reflectors, and it's based in geosynchronous Earth orbit. The concept T6M2 is inspired by Cassiopeia. That's a concept that's been developed in the United Kingdom. And T6M3 is another concept from the US known as Leucidas. This one is in a Molniya orbit and has it's unique in that it has 3 satellites and 2 receivers for the total of 1,000 megawatts of continuous power. All of these were looked at in some detail with and analytical models. Physics-based analytical models were developed of each one. I'm going to share with you quickly just some of the results of that modeling. The cost estimation was done based on detailed grassroots cost estimates of the platform and in-space assembly and construction systems, the ground segment, space transportation, and space logistics, including Earth orbit and in space, as well as standardized cargo carriers. There was an extensive concept of operations, including baseline parameters for labor and for the cost of the hardware. The cost of any in-space refueling was identified. And one of the key assumptions and components of cost estimation was the requirement for disposition at end of life. So all of these platforms went up. The assumption was that they would be deployed, they would operate for a total of 45 years, and then they would be disposed of at end of life. They'd be returned to the Earth so that there would be no contribution to orbital debris as a result of the operations. These are the baseline results. As I mentioned, all of the concepts generated approximately 1 gigawatt on the Earth. Each one had the same lifetime, 45 years of operating life, and so there's a total amount of energy. Each one has different assumptions regarding the system design and the detailed technologies that are used in the system design. So the end-to-end efficiency goes from incoming sunlight to the outgoing electricity on the Earth. Each one has a different mass, and significantly, each of these models had a different number of modules based on the specifics of the design. So the updated, the one that was inspired by the updated version of the 1979 reference, T1M1, had 326,000 modules with an average mass per module of 32, down to the T6M2, which is inspired by the Cassiopeia from the UK, that had 1.2 million modules per platform and a total, an average mass per module of about 4.5 kilograms. And this was one of the most significant aspects of these new modern technology, modular architecture, space solar power systems, that they have enormous numbers of modules that would be mass produced in basically in factory settings here on Earth, and then deployed and constructed using robotic systems, standardized robotic systems in orbit. I'm going to come back and look at the numbers. Yes?
Yeah, Mr. Mankins, just a
Yes.
quick time check. We have like 4 to 5 minutes remaining.
Well, I thought I had till 4:30. I'm sorry.
Oh, yes, I think we can take until 4:30.
It was my understanding I had till 4:30. I apologize.
I apologize for that. So,
Okay. I didn't know I only had till 4:25.
no, I think
That's
you can go ahead until 4:30.
okay.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay. So at any event, I'll rush it along and just wrap up in a moment then. But I only got 20 minutes in total because of the slow start. So the ultimate calculation was of the levelized cost of electricity. And in addition, there were a series of decompositions looking at how much of the life cycle cost, net present value cost for each system came from which of the aspects of the system, either the platform or the Earth to orbit transportation and so on. I won't go into these details. This one just highlights the Earth to orbit transportation costs. I mentioned this because the systems modeling included sensitivity studies looking at a range of costs per kilogram, going from $72 per kilogram up to $2,300 per kilogram, and so on, for each of the 5+1 cases. Similarly, we don't have time today to talk about how the cost estimation was done. It was done using grassroots module by module cost estimates, and then applied learning curve techniques based on aerospace manufacturing experience. And it looked at a range of learning curve assumptions. We also looked at the financials. For example, the cost of debt. How much would it cost to borrow the money? This is just a standardized value of 5%, but the range was from zero debt up to 15%. Then there were variations in the end-to-end efficiency of the energy systems that were also looked at. Ultimately, and this is just some quick summaries, getting to costs for Earth to orbit transportation below $300 to $600 per kilogram is quite critical for space solar power to be cost competitive. In terms of the manufacturing, almost all space solar power systems of this type, these modular systems, involve hundreds of thousands of modules to millions of modules. So they're not strongly dependent on the learning curve assumptions. If you're going to make 1 million mobile phones, they're all going to be fairly reasonably priced. Cost of debt was a major component in the total cost, but it's still not unreasonable for some of the concepts to be competitive, even if the cost of debt were doubled or tripled. And ultimately, the end-to-end energy efficiencies, it's quite critical that the overall efficiency has to be more than 13 or 14% from incoming sunlight to outgoing power. But there are variations within that. So if you have higher efficiency in your solid state power amplifiers, you can have lower efficiency in your photovoltaics and so on. Ultimately, we compared this to various other terrestrial energy options, ranging from small modular reactors through terrestrial solar utility without energy storage. And space solar power was calculated to have a fairly good competitive range, somewhere between 5 and 11 cents per kilowatt hour, versus with the assumptions as discussed. Also, because it's 24/7, it had very good performance with regard to the energy return on energy invested and the carbon impact in terms of grams per kilowatt per CO2 per kilowatt hour delivered. And this just compares space solar power in general with other major energy options such as nuclear, natural gas turbines, wind, and so on. Ultimately, space solar power is very competitive in terms of CO2 production, very low, and has an exceptionally high energy return on energy invested. I won't take the time to go through the technology assessment. I'll just mention that generally speaking, there have been tremendous advances in almost all of the relevant technologies for space solar power in the last 10 years. There remain a number of technologies that are needed that are of low to moderate risk, and there are a few that tend to be concept specific that are currently low technology readiness and would require advancement and demonstration in order for those concepts to go forward. So in closing, I would just say that there have been a wide variety of advances in technology that are quite germane to space solar power. The modular and modern technology approaches have been advanced by multiple players. They tend, because they are large-scale mass production system options, to leverage the advances in the mega constellations for power transmission purposes. Technology development and demos are needed for specific concepts. The pieces are on the order of 5 to 30 kilograms per module, And as a consequence, it really does appear that there are no barriers to preventing space solar power systems to being developed and for development to begin, deployment to begin within the next decade with costs for energy that are highly competitive to existing solutions on earthing very high levels of energy return on energy invested.